Hello folks, and welcome back to Wreck and Rule, where we talk about the upcoming Transformers trading card game by Wizards of the Coast. Again, if you're not aware, it's going to be releasing officially on September 28th. There are people who have starter sets and a couple of other cards as well in hand. They got them at Gen Con, which is a big gaming convention that happens every year. WotC gave out some early release copies during that time. Now, we're going to spend some time today taking a look at the other battle cards that aren't necessarily offensive in nature. We talked about the cards that are offensive in nature on our last episode. You can go back in the channel, you can find it there. These cards are either defensive in nature, they give you some tricks. We're going to talk about them today. We are talking about them in the context of using these cards in an environment where you can use the Autobot starter and maybe a couple of extra cards in addition to that. We're talking about this because hopefully your friendly local gaming store will be running some type of release event when the game does come out. So again, the way that my store is doing it, my store is called All the King's Men in Pittman, New Jersey. We are allowing you to use the Autobot starter and 6 packs. And whatever you open, you use those cards to both build a team and to also build a 40 card deck. As a reminder, a lot of the cards that are available in the starter are commons. There's a pretty good chance that you're going to draw a third copy of some of them to be able to run a full playset of them. A full playset in Transformers TCG is 3 of any given card. Let's start you guys off. Let's take a look at the defensive cards first. So first up is Armor Plating. All it does is give you a static +1 to your defense, and that's pretty good. That +1 is going to mitigate those attacks coming at you. You don't have to worry about flipping cards. It's good to have in there. This is a pretty good staple card. It's a little bit boring, but it does help you out without having to worry about too many tricks. It also gives you that 1 blue defensive pip, so if you flip this over while you are defending, it will add to your defense in that way as well. This is going to be especially important in decks that have 3 characters, or maybe in some cases a deck that only has 2 characters. It's going to help you to keep your characters alive and prevent them from taking damage. If you're running a team where you have 4 characters, this is a little bit more iffy on whether or not you take it. With those 4 character decks, you will be able to hopefully push through some damage before you lose a character. So depending on what you're going for, this may or may not be a 3 of in those 4 character builds. Taking a look up next, we have Improvised Shield. So this doesn't give you any static defense bonuses, but it does give you tough 1, which means that you're going to flip over 1 more battle card when you defend. I would like this a lot on a character like the starter Bumblebee, who does have that tough 1 in robot mode, because now he's going to be tough 2, so you flip over 4 cards in that initial hand when you are defending with him. And you're more likely to draw into blue pips or draw into a white pip to get those 2 extra cards that will come out. The other benefit to this card is that it does give you those orange pips, double orange pips, which are great for if you are attacking and you flip into this card. In that starter environment where that first weekend you're playing some cards, maybe doing a draft type of event, this is worth considering, especially for those 2 orange pips there. Those are helpful to have when you are attacking. This is a little bit more situational. It really does depend a lot on your team and also how you build that deck, because you want to see blue cards in there. This is kind of a 50-50 toss-up if I'm going to have it in my deck or not. Depends on the characters I use. Next up, Rapid Conversion. So this is an action card. So again, when it's your turn, when you activate a character, you can play an action, you can play an upgrade, and you can transform. This allows you to cheat that a little bit in that it's an action. It lets you flip one of your characters to its other mode. Essentially, you are able to transform 2 characters. So if you have certain abilities that trigger when you transform into one of your modes, I'm thinking here Bumblebee in car mode gives Pierce 1 for that turn, or Prime in truck mode allows you to draw a card. That could be helpful, that could be powerful. There are also certain other cards that trigger off of what mode your card is in. We're going to take a look at some of them later on as well. This might help you to get them into that mode. You might have some tricks there that you could pull. The other cool thing about this card is that it does give you that white pip up there. If you happen to draw a character in those 6-packs, like maybe Hound or Mirage, who have abilities that trigger off of those white pips, it is also worth considering. This is probably one of those cards where, you know, if I had 2 Autobot starters and I'm trying to tweak my 40-card deck, this is probably one that I would take out. But again, it depends on if you have some tricks that trigger off of transforming or being in certain modes. Next up, we have Ready for Action. So this card allows you to untap one of your characters that is 10-star cost or fewer. I like this. So this card is good because I think of a character like Red Alert. Red Alert in the Autobot starter, he is going to be your glass cannon. In robot mode, he's got that 5 attack, but he has 0 defense. So if you attack with him, you're dangling him out there. You're making him a tempting target. Because again, whichever character you attack with first, it is likely that your opponent is going to try to focus them down with damage to take them off the board. So this allows you to, especially early on, if you have an undamaged character that you're worried about losing, so you would typically attack with him later. You can attack with him early, which would tap him, and then on your following turn, you can untap him, which means that he is someone that you could attack with again. And again, the other benefit is that your opponent, for the most part, is only able to attack characters that are tapped. So by untapping them, you take them away from being a target. Major downside here is that it does not have any pips at all. So if you draw this card while you are attacking or defending, it's not going to help you out. It's a dead card in that situation. Next up, taking a look at new designs. So again, this is a way that you can kind of cheat through the basic rules of the game. Again, on your turn, you can transform a character, you can play an upgrade, and you can play an event card. This would allow you to play 2 upgrades in one activation. You could put out a weapon and an armor on a character, which will let you attack with them and then hopefully not take as much damage if they get attacked back. You can kind of set up a future turn where you put out multiple upgrades at once, multiple weapons at once. You could also go really, really heavy for offense. So you could put out a weapon on a character, and again, this doesn't work in that starter plus 6 random packs that you pull, but I'm thinking about tandem targeting system, which comes in the convention exclusive pack, which adds +1 to your attack. So you would be able to really buff up your offense there. A neat card, it does give you that orange pip up here. This does sort of want you to have multiple upgrades in your hand at a single time, which can happen. This is probably not one that I would take 3 of, simply for the fact that if I have 2 of these in my hand at once, I'm not really happy about seeing that. So this might be a 1 of, maybe a 2 of, if you're running a lot of upgrades, if you're upgrade heavy. Next up, I'm going to take a look at Datapad. So this is going to be the first way that you can draw extra cards. It's a utility, so it goes onto a character, it stays out there. When the upgraded character attacks, you get to draw a card, then you put a card from your hand on top of your deck. This has a couple of neat features here. So if you are attacking and if you want to get some orange pips, it could allow you to do that. Or maybe you have a card like Datapad where it's got a white pip there. This way you know that when you attack, you're going to be able to draw into additional cards beyond what you would normally get. Datapad, pretty good. I don't know if I would do 3 of this unless I'm running a character, again, like Mirage or like Hound, that wants to see those white pips out there. But it definitely has some potential. It gives you the capability of pulling some cool tricks off. Another way you can draw cards is going to be Incoming Transmission. This is an action card. Allows you to draw 2 cards and then put a card from your hand on top of your deck. Again, this could set you up if you've got some cards in your hand that maybe they're not useful for playing for their effects, but they are useful for the pips that they have. Whether you intend to attack, put out some heavy damage, so you've got maybe a card that has double orange pips on there, or if you know that the character that you're about to activate is going to get hit back, you've got some double blue pips to put out there. It allows you to kind of stack that a little bit. It also lets you, if you draw some cards and you don't like what you have, it allows you to try to change that up a little bit. Next up is Inspiring Leadership, another action. You draw 3 cards, then you scrap 2 cards from your hand. This is kind of that, that panic button where you don't like what you see in your hand at all. Play this action and you net +1 card essentially, because you do have to scrap 2 cards. But this is kind of a good emergency, crap, I don't have anything good, I can't play anything, and then you play this. I don't know if I would take 3 of this unless I'm running a deck that really wants to see a lot of blue pips, which you can see up here. It does help with that, and it does help you to just kind of reset what you have in your hand. This is also great if you kind of luck into a character like maybe Cosmos or Nemesis who want to burn through their deck as quickly as possible. This will allow you to speed that up a little bit. I'm going to take a look now. Ramming speed. I probably should have talked about this last time in my video where we talked about offensive cards, because it does help your offense, or it could also maybe help your defense. If your enemy has an upgrade equipped that you don't like, this allows you to get rid of it. It's an action. We've got that 1 orange pip up here. Say if they have something like Armored Plating, where you want to get rid of it to lower their defense for when you attack, it's helpful for that. If they have a character that has a Flamethrower and you know that their deck is stacked with a lot of orange pips, get rid of Flamethrower. They're not getting that Bold 2. They're not drawing additional cards. Going to help you out there too. This is a neat card. I don't know if I would do 3. I'd maybe consider doing 2. Especially if you're running an offensive type of deck where you want to push through damage really quick. This is helpful in that you can get rid of defense cards, defensive upgrades, and it also has that orange pip too. Repair Bay. So this is one way that you can heal up your character. So it allows you to repair 1 damage from each of your characters. You've got that orange pip to help you if you are flipping cards while attacking. I like this card in a deck where you are running with 4 characters. I like it a little bit less if you have 3 characters. If you have 2 characters, probably not worth it. There's probably better cards out there for you. But I mean, it does help you. It does make it harder for your opponent to just focus damage down too much. Taking a look now. In fact, going to be our last card from the starter set is another action. It is Team Up Tactics. It has that 1 blue pip for if you are defending and you flip it out. So here, the ability text reads, choose one of your characters. If it's a truck, you can repair 2 damage from it. If it's a car, you can draw 2 cards. If you're running trucks, if you're running cars, I definitely recommend that you take this card. This is a great way to heal up Optimus Prime. This is a great way to heal up Ironhide. This is great if you are trying to draw some upgrade cards. If you're playing, say, Bumblebee, or you've got Red Alert out there. There's a lot of other really neat cars and trucks and the abilities that can synergize. So if you're running a team of Autobots, because we've not seen as many trucks or cars for Decepticons, this is probably a card that you want to put into there. It is a rare. You are a little bit less likely to get a third one in those 6 packs that you are pulling in that opening event. But definitely has some utility there. I've had some really neat plays with this, comboing with Prime. If you pull Cup, kind of helps to keep Cup alive. Cup has no ability text, but he's got some pretty decent stats. He's kind of a beefed up combination of Ironhide and Red Alert in one. So that's going to be it for our cards from the starter. Those will knock all of them out. We might take a look in a future episode. We might talk about Optimus and Bumblebee. We've already talked a lot about Red Alert and Ironhide. We did an episode focusing on them, just on those 2 characters. So we're going to continue with a feature that we started last time, where we talk about some random bit of Transformers history. Today, I want to talk about the IDW comics. So IDW got the Transformers license. They began putting comics out for it. Before the license was, it was owned by Dreamwave, who they did some cool stuff. They did some really crappy stuff, but they kind of revitalized Transformers comics. So Dreamwave, it's great that they did that. IDW really took the license and they ran with it. So it began with a mini-series called Infiltration. It was written by Simon Furman. Simon Furman did a lot of great work on the original Generation 1 Transformers comic published by Marvel. He also did Generation 2, and then he kind of set the groundwork for the IDW Transformers universe. So he reset it to really focusing on the idea of robots in disguise. In this series, the Decepticons have what they call an infiltration protocol, where they kind of secretly go onto a planet, they scout it out, they see what the resources are, and that's the initial stage. And they kind of go up from stage 1 to stage 6. Stage 2, they kind of they look at whatever divisions or fractures there already are on that planet, and they try to exacerbate them. And this kind of proceeds through the following steps, which are a little bit fuzzy, but phase 6 is that very last step. And basically at that stage, it's total annihilation of that planet. So in this series, it begins with kind of like a Decepticon cell on Earth, and then an Autobot cell on Earth, and them having the shadow war back and forth. A couple human characters get involved. Eventually, Megatron and Prime show up, as they always do, and it leads to a larger conflict. So this was the starting point. From here, there's a couple of neat kind of side issues or miniseries that also go on. Some spotlight issues. This one here, Spotlight Cup, is notable in that this was both written and it was also drawn by Nick Roche, who does a lot of really neat stuff. We'll come back to him later. To be quite honest, it's an interesting start into the series, but it's not anything that's groundbreakingly amazing. So if you want to really get into the IDW verse, if you really want that background, you can check this out, but it's not really necessary. Kind of a neat miniseries they did was Maximum Dinobots. Everybody loves the Dinobots. They did a poll in our Transformers TCG Facebook group. The Dinobots are what everybody is excited to start running. It's kind of neat to get a 4-issue miniseries that focuses on them. They bring in the Monster Bots too, which are kind of like a Autobot Wetworks Black Ops team. They do the dirty work that the other Autobots are not willing to do. They're basically a more extreme version of the Dinobots. Grimlock is kind of grappling with some issues here. There's some tension in the team. It's a neat 4-issue miniseries to check out. You can get it really cheap on Comixology. So if you like the Dinobots, check it out. After this, the IDW universe it jumps forward in time. there was a series called All Hail Megatron, which sounded awesome. The idea was that the Autobots had lost the war, the Decepticons have conquered Earth, and it's showing what happens in the aftermath. Sounds awesome. Unfortunately, the writer Shane McCarthy doesn't really do a great job with it. It is kind of neat if you're a Generation 1 fan, you love the cartoons. A lot of those characters are the main characters that you see. It's not necessarily worth checking out unless you have a lot of free time and you want to really dig into it. As a writer, Shane McCarthy is not the best. One example of that is he kind of has this fan-created character named Drift. And Drift is basically the Poochie, if you remember The Simpsons, that kind of like extreme, awesome, totally new character that you're supposed to fall in love with. He is an Autobot who used to be a Decepticon. He has, a katana. He's got all these swords. He's a race car. He's into drifting. He's got Japanese writing on the sides of his doors in car mode. Kind of like that character that you would have created back when you were 12 years old and you thought was a complete and utter badass. But as a comic book character and as a miniseries, it's just embarrassing to try to read. After this, a new writer takes over. His name is Mike Costa. I'll be honest, the series you should probably skip. One bright spot, though, during this time, Nick Roche, who we talked about doing that Spotlight Cup issue, does a mini-series called Last Stand of the Wreckers. And it doesn't really involve any of the main characters. There's no Optimus Prime. The biggest characters you see, Springer is in there, Cup is in there, Perceptor is in there, Ultra Magnus is in there, but that's about it. If you are a Star Wars fan, I would compare these to the Rogue Squadron books or comic books. A bunch of side characters get a chance to shine. I highly recommend it. So the Wreckers are from the old UK Transformers comic books, which kind of branched off from the US comic books because they were able to put out more issues rather than just one per month. Springer leads them. They're like the badasses in the Autobot ranks. This series follows some new recruits that kind of get joined up there, and you kind of see what happens from there. The cool thing about Last Stand of the Wreckers is that it is pretty standalone. You don't need to know a lot of background to get into it. If you want to dabble in the IDW stuff, this is a great starting point. And if you don't want to get too deep into it, the Wreckers story continues with Sins of the Wreckers. Again, you don't need a ton of background to get into it. And then it kind of caps off with Requiem of the Wreckers. And that story of these characters kind of has a good stopping point there. So if you only want to dabble, check it out. The one bright spot from the just Transformers ongoing series were these two issues 22 and 23. So the main writer, Mike Costa, steps back, and a new writer, James Roberts, takes over. James Roberts helped out Nick Roche on the Wreckers stuff, and then he has a chance here to kind of do some flashback stories. You look at Megatron, you look at Prime before the war begins. Megatron is, he works as a miner, and he kind of has these dreams or these goals of leading this non-violent revolution, because Cybertronian society at the time, your alt mode dictated what you did in life. And he wants to kind of overthrow that, but he wants to do it peacefully. He and his buddy Impactor, who is one of the Wreckers, they get into a bar fight. They get arrested. And while in prison, Megatron is like brutally beaten. And at this point, you start to see those seeds of, the Decepticon ideology transform from being a peaceful movement to being one based on violence. He has a follow-up issue where we look at Optimus during those days. Optimus was Orion Pax. Orion Pax was a police officer during that time. He is the one who sets Megatron free from prison. He reads Megatron's writings and becomes inspired. And Prime is one of the key components in overthrowing the society at the time. And you kind of see the interconnectedness between Prime and Megatron, between the Autobots and the Decepticons. A neat beginning here. So after the series gets done, the IDW universe kind of like resets again. So you've got this standalone issue called The Death of Optimus Prime. Not his literal death, but his symbolic death. He decides that kind of he's done enough, that he's going to kind of go out there in the universe on his own, do his own thing, and let Cybertron kind of develop on its own without him. He goes back to being Orion Pax. He leaves Cybertron. And at this point, there are two main series that branch out of this one issue. So on one hand, you have More Than Meets the Eye. James Roberts continues. He kind of set up that back history of Prime and Megatron. This is a guy who was writing essentially Transformers novels unofficially on his own, doing a lot of short story stuff for the fanzines in the UK side. He has a chance. He focuses on Hot Rod. So Hot Rod takes, we call him Rodimus actually. Rodimus takes his crew and he takes them out in search of the Knights of Cybertron, who he is hoping will be able to revitalize Cybertron at the time, which, war-torn, falling apart. He wants to help them out. So he assembles this very eclectic crew. Ultra Magnus. Ultra Magnus is the kind of enforcer of what they call the Tyrest Accord. He is this guy who is very by the books. He follows the rules. Roberts takes Drift and he rehabilitates the character. He is a lot more interesting here. Ratchet. Ratchet is this kind of like old, grumpy, curmudgeonly type of guy who's out there searching for someone that can take over his spot as kind of like the chief medic or chief surgeon on Cybertron. Cyclonus, the lone Decepticon as we begin, kind of looking to do his own thing, branch away from what's happening on Cybertron. Whirl over here is the sadistic, messed up Autobot. So you've got all these characters, they play off each other, a lot of soap opera type, like interpersonal drama going on. I highly recommend this series. A lot of cool stuff goes on here. This eventually turns into another series called Lost Light, which is currently ongoing. So it just changes the name, same characters. Another neat thing that happens here is that Megatron becomes an Autobot, and you see what happens after he's forced to kind of renounce his ways. The other series that branches out of Death of Optimus Prime is Robots in Disguise. And this focuses on Cybertron and what's going on there. It's a lot more like the G1 cartoon cast and what happens there. Bumblebee is kind of the leader on Cybertron. He's got people like Ironhide and Prowl and Wheeljack, which, by the way, this art should look familiar to you, helping him out and advising him. On top of that, you have Starscream, who is kind of like, essentially leading the Decepticons on Cybertron. The war officially is over, but now you've got the Autobots and you've got the Decepticons who are trying to reconcile and try to figure out how this new Cybertron is going to work out with these, two factions that have been at war for millions of years. You also have a bunch of Cybertronians who show up who are not in either faction. And they try to see where they fit into this world. It's very political, very backstabby. If you like Starscream, good spot to check out. This series eventually kind of branches out to a character called Windblade. Windblade was a character that was kind of designed by the fans. They were able to vote on, do you want it to be a male character or female? They chose female. What alternate mode do you want them to have? They chose a jet. And you kind of like, Windblade was from this lost colony of Cybertronians. She shows up on Cybertron and tries to find her place in the way of things. This eventually branches out to a couple of interconnected series. Till All Are One is kind of like the main branching title to look for. If you like Windblade, if you like Starscream, definitely worth checking out. Robots in Disguise turns into Optimus Prime because Prime comes back. He kind of takes over again, and Prime comes to Earth. Prime essentially annexes Earth. He says, you are now part of this Cybertronian empire. He does that to protect them, essentially. But now there's this tension between the Autobots, between humans on Earth. Soundwave is kind of in charge of this group of Decepticons who are also on Earth, and it's them all kind of playing off of each other. Also pretty neat. And then all of this is kind of culminating in, of course, Unicron shows up. And that's where we are right now, where we're kind of seeing how Unicron plays into it, along with the Autobots, the Decepticons. Can they truly come together to stop this, apocalyptic threat? So that's kind of an overview of the IDW stuff. Just to kind of sum it up, my advice for you guys would be to start, if you want to just kind of get into the really, really good stuff. Check out Last Stand of the Wreckers. Start with that. Read the other Wreckers books. From there, track down issues 22 and 23 of the Mike Costa Transformers ongoing series. You can stop with those two. Gives you some background on Prime and Megatron. From there, read Death of Optimus Prime. From there, check out More Than Meets the Eye. Check out Robots in Disguise and the kind of series that branch out from them. The IDW stuff is really, really cool. It is building to kind of like an ending with this Unicron miniseries going on. At that point, it's going to somehow reset, but they have not really talked a lot yet about what that's going to look like and how it's going to go. Thank you guys for listening. This episode went a little bit long. I know a lot of it was not focused on the card game. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, please like, leave some comments, let me know what you would like to see, what you'd like to kind of talk about. Thank you for your time and have a good day.